My name is Charlotte Reed.
And today,
I'm sitting in the corner office that once felt like a dream too far away. The polished glass desk reflects the city skyline, and the hum of the air conditioner fills the silence between the soft clicks of my pen. My blazer, sharp, tailored, navy blue, sits perfectly on my shoulders, a silent reminder of the battles I've fought to be here. But the irony? This isn't just any office. It's the one my old boss used to sit in. The same boss who looked me dead in the eye 3 years ago and said, "You're not ready for promotion, Charlotte. Maybe someday, but not now." I still remember the sting of those words. Back then, I forced a polite smile, nodded, and walked out of his office with trembling hands. He thought he was ending a conversation. He had no idea he was fueling a revolution inside me. Now, his name flashes across my phone screen. A meeting request. Urgent. I let out a small laugh. One only I can hear. The same man who dismissed me now needs me. I lean back in my chair, adjusting the silver bracelet on my wrist, my grandmother's gift, the one I wore that very day I was denied. The cool metal against my skin feels like both an anchor and a weapon. Funny how tables turn. I whisper under my breath. Because this time, I'm not walking into his office. He's walking into mine. 3 years ago, I was a different woman. Not weak, but softer, hungrier, eager to prove myself in every meeting, every report, every late-night email I sent at 2 a.m. I believed that if I worked hard enough, someone would notice. Someone would reward me. That someone was my boss, Richard Grant. He had the kind of presence that made people straighten in their chairs when he walked into a room. Broad shoulders, silver-streaked hair, and a voice that carried authority without effort. For a long time, I respected him, maybe even admired him, until the day everything changed. I had been preparing for weeks for that meeting, the one where promotions were being decided. My portfolio was spotless, my performance reviews glowing, and my results undeniable. My colleagues whispered encouragement. "This is your time, Charlotte." I walked into Richard's office with my notebook pressed tight against my chest. His blinds were half open, sunlight cutting across his mahogany desk. He didn't even ask me to sit. "Charlotte," he said, sighing like he carried the weight of the world. "You've done good work. But promotion? You're not ready. Maybe in a few years. You still need seasoning." His words hit harder than a slap. Not ready? After all the projects I saved, the clients I charmed, the hours I gave up? I swallowed hard, forcing composure. My hands shook slightly as I gripped my pen. I felt that lump rising in my throat, but I refused to let him see me cry. "Of course, sir," I said quietly. But inside, something cracked open. Later that night, I sat on my bed with my grandmother's silver bracelet twirling around my wrist. She once told me, "Charlotte, never beg for a seat at a table where they don't respect your presence. Build your own table." Her voice echoed in my head until it drowned out Richard's. I closed my laptop, stared at my reflection in the dark window, and made a decision that terrified me more than anything. I was done waiting for permission. I would quit. I would start over. I would build something he couldn't deny, something no one could take away from me. And when I finally turned in my resignation letter, Richard barely looked up from his desk. He smirked, almost dismissive, and said, "Good luck out there, Charlotte. You'll need it." He had no idea just how right he was. The morning after I quit, I woke up with fear sitting heavy on my chest. For the first time in years, I had no company email, no structured meetings, no paycheck waiting at the end of the month. Just silence and freedom. I poured myself a cup of coffee in my tiny apartment kitchen and stared at my laptop like it held all the answers. What now? That's when I remembered something I had always loved: project strategy. I was good at connecting dots, at seeing the cracks in systems and turning them into opportunities. If Richard couldn't see that, someone else would. I spent weeks teaching myself new tools, certifications, and business trends. My nights were spent in front of glowing screens, my mornings filled with cold coffee and messy notes scattered across the floor. There were moments I doubted myself, moments I thought maybe Richard was right. Maybe I wasn't ready. But then I met Eleanor Brooks. She was a seasoned consultant, sharp as glass, but kind in a way Richard never was. I found her through a networking event I almost didn't attend. I stood in the corner in a thrift store blazer, sipping watered-down champagne, when she approached me. "You look like someone who doesn't know she belongs here," she said with a smile. Her words struck me. She introduced herself, asked about my background, and listened, truly listened, as I spilled my story. Unlike Richard, she didn't dismiss me. She said, "If you're willing to work harder than you've ever worked, I'll give you a shot." That shot changed everything. I started as her assistant, shadowing meetings, scribbling notes, and staying up past midnight to refine presentations. Slowly, Eleanor pushed me forward. She let me present, let me pitch, let me lead small projects. And when I stumbled, which I did, plenty, she didn't cut me down. She corrected me. She built me. The first time I landed a client on my own, I remember sitting in my car afterward, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. Tears rolled down my cheeks, not of sadness, but of relief. Proof. Proof that I could. One client turned into three. Three turned into a network. Soon, I wasn't just surviving. I was building something real. But I kept it quiet. To the outside world, including old colleagues who occasionally messaged me, I was figuring things out. My social media showed modest updates, a coffee shop photo here, a book I was reading there. No one saw the contract signed, the invoices paid, the late nights that turned into early mornings. I wanted it that way. My success was mine, private, protected. I didn't need validation anymore. Still, in quiet moments, I'd touch my grandmother's bracelet and whisper to myself, "Build your own table." And I did. Piece by piece, late night by late night, client by client. Until one day, Eleanor looked at me across her desk, pride in her eyes, and said, "Charlotte, you're ready to take the lead. You don't need me anymore. You're running this." And just like that, the girl who once trembled in Richard Grant's office had become the woman executives called when their projects were on fire. And soon even Richard would. The day of the meeting, the air in my office felt heavier than usual. The skyline glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, but my attention was fixed on the digital calendar notification glowing on my screen. Meeting with Richard Grant, 10 a.m. My lips curled into a quiet smile. The man who once decided I wasn't ready was about to walk into my office. Only this time, the power dynamic had flipped. I smoothed the sleeve of my cream silk blouse, adjusted the silver bracelet on my wrist, and stood tall. My assistant, Megan, peeked in. "They're here," she said, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. "They." Not just Richard, but his team. "Send them in," I replied, my tone calm but charged with anticipation. The door opened, and in walked Richard. His presence hadn't changed, broad frame, tailored suit, the faint smell of his expensive cologne. But for the first time, he looked uncertain. Behind him trailed two junior managers and a project coordinator, their eyes darting curiously around the office. And why wouldn't they? My office was nothing like the cramped cubicles or sterile boardrooms we once shared. The walls were adorned with contemporary art collected from young female painters I supported. On the side table rested framed photos, me with Eleanor Brooks, the mentor who gave me my first break, and snapshots from conferences where I was the keynote speaker. Every detail screamed success, independence, authority. Richard's eyes flicked across the room, lingering on the executive chair behind my desk, my chair. He cleared his throat, visibly trying to collect himself. "Charlotte," he said finally, his voice tighter than I remembered. "Thank you for meeting with us." I gestured gracefully toward the conference table by the window. "Of course. Please have a seat." They shuffled into chairs, but Richard remained standing for a moment longer, as if resisting the reality that he was now on my turf. When he finally sat, I noticed the way his fingers drummed nervously on the table. I began with business. "I've reviewed your proposal," I said, sliding a neatly bound report toward him. "The project you're hoping to secure is now under my firm's management. Any collaboration will go through me directly." The silence that followed was delicious. The younger managers blinked, trying to process. Richard's jaw tightened. I wasn't aware you were leading this firm, he muttered. I leaned back in my chair, crossing one leg over the other. That's because you never care to ask where I went after I left your office. You assumed I'd fade away. But here we are. One of the junior managers whispered, "Wait, you own this?" His tone held more awe than skepticism. "Yes," I said simply. "Every contract, every client, every decision comes through me." I let the weight of my words settle. The city buzzed faintly outside the glass windows, but inside, the room was silent, except for Richard's shallow breathing. Finally, I stood, walking toward the window where the light bathed me in a glow that made me feel untouchable. I turned back to face them. 3 years ago, Richard told me I wasn't ready for promotion. I said, my voice steady, almost conversational. He said I needed more seasoning. What he didn't realize was that rejection lit a fire in me. And now, the very projects he used to control, they run under my leadership. Their faces told the story, disbelief, shame, and in Richard's eyes, something between regret and fear. He opened his mouth, searching for words. But for once, Richard Grant had nothing to say. I let a small, satisfied smile spread across my face. "So, shall we discuss the terms of our collaboration?" Richard shifted in his chair, his face pale against the bright morning light streaming through my office windows. For years, I had sat across from him, measuring my worth against his approval. Now he sat across from me, waiting for mine. I let the silence stretch, savoring the shift in power. My bracelet slid gently against my wrist as I folded my hands on the table. "Before we move forward," I began, my voice calm but unyielding, "there are conditions. Non-negotiable ones." Richard's brows furrowed. "Conditions?" "Yes." I looked directly at him, making sure my gaze didn't waver. "If your firm wants to collaborate with mine, these are the terms." The younger managers leaned forward, almost eager. Richard swallowed hard. "First," I said, "respect. I will not tolerate condescension, dismissiveness, or the kind of arrogance I endured under your leadership. Every email, every meeting, every interaction, professional and respectful. Without exception." Richard gave a stiff nod, though I could see the pride burning in his jawline. "Second," I continued, my tone softening slightly, "accountability. I expect full transparency in every project. No corner-cutting, no excuses, no blaming subordinates. If something goes wrong, you own it. That's the only way collaboration will work." One of the junior managers glanced at Richard nervously. They knew this was directed squarely at him. "And third," I let my words hang for a moment, then leaned forward, my eyes locking with his. "Humility. Richard, you once told me I wasn't ready. You dismissed me without giving me the chance to prove myself. I don't need an apology for that. But I do need assurance that you will never underestimate, dismiss, or belittle another woman in your company the way you did me. Not ever again." The room went quiet. Even the hum of the air conditioner felt distant. Richard's lips parted, but no words came. He was a man choking on the taste of his own history. I softened my tone, just slightly. "This isn't about revenge, Richard. It's about change. I worked too hard to get here to repeat old patterns. If you want my firm on board, you'll play by my rules." The junior manager, a young woman named Sophie, looked at me with something close to admiration. For a moment, I thought I saw myself in her. Eager, capable, waiting for someone to believe in her. I gave her the smallest nod before turning back to Richard. "So," I said, leaning back, "what will it be? Collaboration under these conditions? Or walking away empty-handed?" Richard's eyes dropped to the polished table. For the first time in my career, I saw him hesitate. The man who had once held my future in his careless grip now sat, stripped of power, forced to reckon with his own pride. Finally, his voice cracked the silence. "We'll meet your terms." I allowed a measured smile. "Good. Then we can begin." And just like that, the roles were reversed. He no longer dictated my future. I dictated his. The meeting ended, but the echo of my words lingered in the air long after Richard and his team had left. I stood by the window, watching them disappear down the glass corridor, their figures shrinking until they blended with the steady hum of the city below. For years, I had dreamed of this moment, not of revenge, but of recognition. And now that it had arrived, I didn't feel the bitterness I once imagined. I felt free. I walked back to my desk and picked up the silver bracelet on my wrist, letting the light catch its worn edges. My grandmother's words drifted back to me as if she were in a room. Never beg for a seat at a table where they don't respect your presence. Build your own table. And I had. The projects I ran now weren't just contracts or spreadsheets. They were proof of resilience. Proof that every late night, every tear shed in silence, every time I chose to keep going instead of giving up, it all led here. Over the next weeks, something unexpected happened. Richard changed. Slowly, carefully, he began to lower his guard. He listened more, interrupted less. In meetings, I watched him pause before speaking, his words more measured than before. It wasn't redemption overnight, but it was something. And Sophie, the young manager with sharp eyes and untapped potential, I made sure she was never overlooked. I offered her guidance the way Eleanor once offered me. Watching her confidence grow felt like planting seeds in soil I once struggled to break through. I realized then that power wasn't just about control. It was about legacy, about ensuring no one else had to endure the dismissal I once did. One evening, long after the office had emptied, I sat alone, city lights flickering against the glass. I traced the bracelet on my wrist and let the weight of my journey settle around me. The girl who once trembled in Richard's office was gone. In her place stood a woman who no longer asked for permission, no longer needed validation, no longer doubted her worth. I smiled to myself, a whisper escaping my lips like a vow, like a final line of a story that was always meant to end this way. My boss refused my promotion now. I control his projects,